The first time I saw Adrian Cole holding another woman's hand, I did not scream. I did not run toward him, and I did not collapse in the middle of the street the way heartbroken women do in movies. I simply stood across the road holding a paper bag of pastries I had bought for him, watching the man I loved lean close to another woman with the same gentle smile he used to give me. That was the moment my life split into two versions. Before that moment, I believed Adrian was the kind of man people rarely found anymore. He was calm, well-spoken, respectful, and almost old-fashioned in the way he carried himself. He opened doors, sent good morning messages, remembered small details, and spoke about loyalty as if it were a sacred rule he lived by. He never raised his voice in public. He never dressed carelessly. He never posted reckless things online. Around my friends, he was charming, but not too charming, attentive, but not desperate, serious enough to feel safe. To everyone else, he looked like a man with principles. To me, he looked like the future. I was 24 when I met him, still young enough to believe that a steady voice meant a steady heart. I had just started working at a small design studio, trying to build a life that felt independent and meaningful. I was not naive in the way people like to describe young women after they have been hurt. I knew bad men existed. I knew people lied. I knew love could make someone blind. But Adrian did not look like danger. That was the problem. Danger does not always arrive with red flags waving in the wind. Sometimes, danger wears a clean shirt, speaks softly, remembers your favorite tea, and tells you that it only wants to protect you from a world that does not understand your heart. Adrian was 31, 7 years older than me, and he knew exactly how to make that age difference feel like safety instead of control. He called himself traditional, but never in a way that sounded harsh at first. He said he believed love should be intentional. He said relationships should be private, not displayed for strangers to judge. He said a woman deserved a man who could guide her through life with maturity. Back then, those words sounded comforting. Later, I would understand how carefully they were chosen. Our relationship began slowly. He did not rush me, and that made me trust him more. He asked about my childhood, my work, my fears, my family, and my dreams. He listened with the kind of patience that makes a lonely person feel discovered. When I spoke, he looked at me as if every word mattered. When I doubted myself, he told me I was more talented than I realized. When I worried about the future, he described a quiet life together with such certainty that I began to imagine it too. He never said he owned me. He simply made me feel chosen. At first, being chosen felt like love. Then slowly, it became a cage. Adrian disliked many things, but he framed every dislike as concern. He did not like my closest friend Maya because he thought she encouraged me to be too impulsive. He did not like my late nights at the studio because he said ambitious workplaces took advantage of young women. He did not like certain dresses because he claimed other men would misunderstand me. He did not like when I posted photos of myself because he said real love did not need public validation. Each comment was small enough to ignore. Each boundary arrived wrapped in tenderness. He never demanded directly. He only became quiet, disappointed, or distant until I adjusted myself to bring back the warmth I had become addicted to. I stopped wearing certain clothes. I answered messages faster. I canceled plans when he looked hurt. I told myself these were compromises. I told myself every relationship required adjustment. I told myself a man who cared deeply could sometimes become overly protective. I had no idea that I was slowly editing my own life to fit inside the narrow space he approved. And because Adrian looked so respectable, everyone believed him before they questioned me. My mother liked him because he spoke politely and brought flowers when he visited. My co-workers admired him because he had a good job at a public relations firm and carried himself like someone important. Even Maya, who never fully trusted him, struggled to explain why. She once told me that Adrian's kindness felt rehearsed not natural. I became defensive. I said she did not understand him. I said he was simply more mature than the men we were used to. That memory still hurts. Not because Maya was right, though she was. It hurts because when someone is manipulating you gently, you often defend them against the people trying to save you. For nearly a year, Adrian made me believe I was the only woman he truly respected. He told me he had no patience for shallow relationships. He said modern dating had become cheap and careless. He said he hated men who played with women's emotions. He said trust was everything to him. He said betrayal was unforgivable. Those words became sacred in my mind. So when small inconsistencies appeared, I did not want to see them. There were evenings when he disappeared for hours and later explained that work had become overwhelming. There were weekends when he refused to meet, saying he needed solitude to think clearly. There were names that appeared too often on his phone, then vanished from notifications after I noticed them. There were restaurants he seemed strangely familiar with, though he told me he had never been there. There were gifts he gave me that felt thoughtful until I later realized they were too generic, the kind of gifts a man could buy in bulk and still make each woman feel personally understood. But love is skilled at making excuses. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he valued privacy. I told myself I had been hurt before and was imagining danger where there was none. Adrian encouraged that explanation. Whenever I asked a question, he did not answer with anger. He answered with sadness. He made my doubt sound like betrayal. He made me feel as if suspicion was something ugly I had brought into a pure relationship. So I apologized for noticing. The day everything changed began like any ordinary Saturday. Adrian had canceled our lunch the night before, saying he needed to visit an older colleague who was going through a difficult time. He sounded tired on the phone, almost noble in his exhaustion. I felt guilty for feeling disappointed. So the next morning I decided to surprise him. I knew he loved pastries from a small bakery near his office, the kind filled with almond cream and dusted with sugar. I imagined dropping them off quickly, maybe making him smile, maybe proving that I could support him without demanding too much. I remember the weather clearly. The sky was pale, and the city felt washed clean after rain. I remember the paper bag warm in my hands. I remember checking my reflection in a shop window and smiling at how foolishly happy I looked. Then I saw him. Adrian was across the street outside a quiet cafe, standing close to a woman I had never seen before. She was beautiful, though that was not what wounded me first. What wounded me was the familiarity of his body language, the way he leaned in, the way he tilted his head when listening, the way his hand rested lightly at her back as she laughed, the way he looked at her with that softened expression I had believed belonged only to me. For several seconds, my mind refused to understand. I thought perhaps she was a colleague. Then his fingers brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek. I thought perhaps she was upset and he was comforting her. Then she touched his chest with casual intimacy, and he smiled like a man being admired. Something cold moved through me. I crossed the street halfway, then stopped behind a parked delivery van. I was close enough to see them clearly, but not close enough for him to notice me. He took a small box from his coat pocket and gave it to her. She opened it and looked delighted. I recognized the box immediately. It was from the same boutique where he had bought my necklace on our 6-month anniversary. Not similar. The same cream-colored box, the same ribbon, the same little card tucked beneath the lid. I stood there with pastries growing cold in my hands, watching the woman lift the gift while Adrian looked at her as if he had created happiness itself. That was the first crack. But it was not the deepest one. The deepest crack came when he took her hand. Not passionately, not dramatically, just naturally, as if he had done it many times before. He guided her down the sidewalk toward the cafe entrance, and before they stepped inside, she reached up and adjusted his collar with the comfortable tenderness of someone who believed she had the right. I did not follow them inside. I walked away. I do not remember getting home. I only remember sitting on the edge of my bed with the paper bag still in my lap, untouched. My phone lit up twice that afternoon. Adrian sent a calm message saying the visit with his colleague had run long. He said he missed me. He added a little line about how he hoped I was resting and not overworking myself. The lie was so smooth that I almost admired it. Almost. For the first time, I did not answer immediately. A part of me wanted to confront him that night. I wanted to ask who she was. I wanted him to panic, to explain badly, to reveal the truth through fear. But another part of me, a quieter and colder part that I did not know I possessed, told me to wait. Because if he could lie that easily, then one question would not uncover the truth. It would only teach him to hide better. So I waited. That night, Adrian called me. His voice was warm, a little tired, perfectly controlled. He spoke about duty stress and how much peace I brought into his life. I listened. For the first time, I noticed how beautiful his voice was when he lied. Not nervous, not rushed. Beautiful, like a polished instrument. When he asked why I was quiet, I said I was just tired. He believed me. Or perhaps he believed I was still the version of myself he had trained to doubt her own instincts. Over the next week, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled when he expected softness. I answered when he expected obedience. I let him hold my hand. I let him speak about our future. I watched his face as he lied, and began to understand that I had never truly known him at all. At the same time, I began looking for the woman from the cafe. It was not hard to find her, though I wish it had been. Adrian had always told me he avoided social media drama, but people like him often forget that other people do not. I searched through tagged photos from places he visited, public event posts, mutual connections, and cafe check-ins. Eventually, I found her. Her name was Vanessa Reed. She was 26, a freelance event coordinator with bright eyes, soft curls, and a feed filled with flowers, city streets, and carefully framed coffee cups. She did not look like a villain. That disappointed the wounded part of me at first. Pain wants a target. Betrayal wants someone to blame. For a few ugly minutes, I wanted to hate her. Then I saw a photo she had posted 2 months earlier. Only part of a man's arm was visible beside her dinner plate. The cuff of his shirt showed in the corner. I recognized the watch, Adrian's watch. The caption spoke vaguely about being grateful for someone patient and kind, someone who made her believe in real love again. My stomach turned. I scrolled further. There were no photos of his face. Adrian had trained her too. Privacy, protection. Serious relationships do not need public display. The same phrases, I was sure of it. I found a picture of the same boutique box he had given me, another post about a surprise dinner at a restaurant where he had taken me for my birthday. A story highlight featuring a hand holding a cup of tea in his kitchen, the same kitchen where I had cooked dinner for him 3 nights later. It was not one mistake. It was a second life. I should have hated Vanessa then, but as I looked at her posts, the anger shifted. She was not flaunting him. She was hiding him, because he had likely asked her to. She was not mocking me. She did not know I existed. She was writing soft captions about love and healing, the same way I had written private journal entries after Adrian convinced me that he was different from every careless man I had ever feared. That was when my pain became something larger than heartbreak. It became recognition. I messaged her from a new account first, but not with accusations. I simply asked whether she knew Adrian Cole. She did not respond for several hours. When she finally did, her reply was cautious. She asked who I was and why I wanted to know. I nearly deleted everything. Then I sent her one photo. Not intimate, not cruel, just a picture of Adrian and me at a charity dinner 2 months earlier, his arm around my waist, his smile steady and proud. I told her I was sorry, but I believed we had both been lied to. The typing dots appeared and vanished many times. When her answer came, it was not defensive. It was shaken. She asked how long we had been together. I told her. Then she told me her timeline. It overlapped almost perfectly. Adrian had approached her at an industry networking event, presenting himself as single-principled and tired of shallow women. He had told her he admired her sincerity. He had told her he wanted something real. He had told her he valued privacy because his work involved public image and sensitive clients. The same script, different woman. Same man. We agreed to meet at a quiet tea shop the next afternoon. I arrived first, my hands so cold around the cup that the heat barely reached me. When Vanessa walked in, I recognized her immediately. She looked smaller in person, not physically but emotionally, as if she had spent the night watching the walls of her life move closer. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. It is strange to meet the woman you thought might be your enemy and realize she is carrying the same wound. Vanessa did not cry at first. Neither did I. We sat across from each other and began comparing facts with the calm precision of people trying not to fall apart in public. Dates, gifts, restaurants, messages, canceled plans, excuses, promises. Even the phrases matched so closely that after a while we stopped being surprised. He had called both of us the only person who understood him. He had told both of us that he valued loyalty above everything. He had given both of us nearly identical necklaces. He had taken both of us to the same quiet hill outside the city and described the same future in almost the same words. He had even used sadness as a weapon in the same way. When Vanessa asked why she could never meet his close friends, he said he had been betrayed before and needed time. When I asked why he avoided certain public places with me, he said he wanted to protect our peace. When she wondered why he sometimes disappeared at night, he said family obligations were complicated. When I wondered the same, he said work drained him. 2 women. 1 mask. By the time Vanessa showed me her messages, her hands were shaking. Not from jealousy, from horror. She realized, as I had, that we had not merely been cheated on, we had been studied. Adrian had learned our insecurities, our histories, our hopes, and our weaknesses, then used them to shape himself into the exact man each of us wanted to believe existed. Vanessa told me she had once confessed that her previous boyfriend made her feel replaceable. Adrian then made her feel uniquely chosen. I told her I had once admitted that I feared being too much, too emotional, too difficult to love. Adrian then made me feel that my obedience was proof of maturity. He had not loved either of us. He had managed us. That word became important. Managed. Adrian worked in public relations, after all. He understood perception. He understood timing. He understood how to build a clean image and bury anything inconvenient beneath polished language. He did not see relationships as love stories. He saw them as narratives to control. And once Vanessa and I began looking, we found more. A former co-worker named Elise had left his firm abruptly the year before. Online, people suggested she had been unstable. Vanessa knew someone who knew her. We reached out carefully. Elise responded with one sentence at first, saying she had wondered when someone else would finally find out. Then there was Marin, a photographer Adrian had once described to me as a troubled woman obsessed with him. When we contacted her, we learned that she had dated him for 6 months and had been made to believe she was the problem when he withdrew without explanation. There was also June, a nonprofit coordinator who had received the same speeches about privacy, loyalty, and how rare she was. None of us had known about the others. Each of us had been placed inside a separate room in Adrian's life, and he had moved between those rooms wearing whatever expression was required. The more we gathered, the clearer the pattern became. He did not choose careless women. He chose thoughtful women, women who wanted serious love, women who were capable of loyalty, women who had some old wound that made them vulnerable to a man who seemed stable. He did not target weakness in the simple sense. He targeted hope. That realization made me angrier than the cheating itself, because betrayal is painful, but manipulation is insulting to the soul. It tells you that your tenderness, your honesty, your willingness to trust were not received as gifts. They were treated as tools. For 2 weeks we collected evidence, not for gossip, not for revenge in the reckless way people imagine. We knew that if we attacked Adrian publicly without structure, he would twist the story. He would call us unstable. He would say jealous women had conspired after being rejected. He would use our pain as proof against us. So we became careful. Vanessa saved messages with timestamps. Elise provided old emails. Marin had recordings of Adrian admitting he needed to keep his image clean at work. June had photos from dates on nights he told me he was caring for a sick relative. I had messages where he spoke about future marriage while already seeing Vanessa. We built a timeline so clear that his excuses would have nowhere to stand. Then came the opportunity none of us expected. Adrian's company announced its annual gala where he was to receive a leadership award for ethical branding and community influence. The irony was so sharp, it almost felt fictional. The same man who had turned honesty into a costume was being honored for integrity. His firm had built campaigns around trust responsibility and moral leadership. Adrian's colleagues admired him. Younger employees respected him. Clients believed he understood reputation because he seemed to live so cleanly. He had built a temple to his own image, and he planned to stand inside it under bright lights. At first, I did not want to go. The thought of seeing him praised made me physically sick. But Vanessa said something I could not forget. She said men like Adrian survived because every woman was made to feel alone, ashamed, and too emotional to be believed. If we stayed hidden, he would simply reset the story and choose new women. That was when I understood what the night had to become. Not a scene, not a fight. A record. We contacted the company's ethics board through Elise, who still had one trustworthy connection inside. We provided evidence privately first. We did not want chaos for its own sake. We wanted accountability. At first, the company responded cautiously, almost coldly. Adrian was valuable. Men with clean images often become assets other people are reluctant to question. But the evidence was too organized to dismiss. The board asked whether we would be willing to submit formal statements. We agreed. The gala went forward because the company did not want public disruption before completing its review. But by then, several people inside knew the truth. Adrian did not. That night I wore a simple navy dress he had never seen. Not the pale colors he preferred on me. Not the delicate jewelry he praised because it made me look gentle. I wore my hair back, my face calm, and no necklace from him. Around my wrist I wore a bracelet Maya had given me years before. One I had stopped wearing because Adrian once suggested it looked childish. When I put it on, I felt like I was returning something to myself. Vanessa arrived separately. Elise and Marin came too, not as guests seeking attention, but as witnesses who had finally stopped carrying shame that did not belong to them. We did not stand together at first. That was intentional. We wanted Adrian to see each truth arrive from a different direction. The gala hall was elegant, filled with glass walls, soft music, and people who believed themselves sophisticated. Adrian moved through the crowd like a man born for admiration. He smiled, shook hands, touched shoulders, and accepted praise with modest downward glances. I had once loved that humility. Now I saw the mechanics beneath it. When he saw me, his expression flickered, only for a moment. Then the mask returned. He approached with warmth, as if I were the woman who still belonged to him. He asked why I had not told him I was coming, shaping the question gently enough to sound affectionate, but with control underneath. I told him I wanted to support him on an important night. He smiled, but his eyes searched my face. He knew something was different. He just did not know how much. Then he saw Vanessa across the room. For the first time since I had known him, Adrian lost control of his expression in public. Not completely, but enough. His smile froze, his shoulders tightened, his eyes moved from her to me, then back again. A man who had spent years separating women into private compartments suddenly saw two doors open at once. I watched him calculate. That was what hurt most, even then. Not panic, not guilt, not sorrow. Calculation. He was not thinking about the pain he caused. He was thinking about containment. Before he could speak, the program began. Adrian was called to the stage. A senior executive introduced him as a man of rare integrity, someone who understood that trust was the foundation of all meaningful communication. People applauded. Screens behind him displayed photos of campaigns he had led, charity events he had attended, speeches he had given about ethical influence. The room adored him. Adrian stepped up to accept the award. He began with gratitude. He spoke about honesty as a responsibility. He spoke about protecting vulnerable voices. He spoke about the importance of living the values one promoted. Every sentence landed inside me like something stolen. Then the screen changed, not abruptly enough to seem dramatic at first. A company representative stepped forward and explained that before the award could be finalized, the ethics board needed to address serious concerns regarding conduct inconsistent with the values being honored. The room shifted. Polite confusion spread. Adrian's face went still. No private messages were displayed for entertainment. No intimate details were exposed unnecessarily. What appeared instead was a documented timeline, formal and undeniable. Conflicting relationship claims, misrepresentations, repeated use of the company's reputation to build personal trust, evidence of manipulation involving multiple women connected through professional and social networks. Screenshots were redacted where they needed to be, but the pattern remained clear. Then Vanessa stood. She did not cry. She gave her statement with a steady voice, explaining that she had been led to believe Adrian was single and serious about a future. Elise followed, describing how he had used professional influence to damage her credibility after she questioned him. Marin confirmed similar tactics. June's written statement was read by the ethics chair. Then it was my turn. I stood not because I wanted everyone to pity me, but because for too long Adrian had relied on my silence. I spoke calmly. I explained that the man on that stage had built trust by speaking about loyalty while living several lies at once. I explained that the issue was not private heartbreak alone, but a repeated pattern of emotional manipulation protected by a public image of morality. I explained that every woman he deceived had been made to feel isolated, unreasonable, and ashamed. I did not call him names. I did not need to. The truth did enough. Adrian tried to respond. Of course he did. Men like him always believe language can save them, because language has saved them before. He began framing the situation as complicated, personal, and painful. He suggested misunderstandings. He implied emotional distress. He spoke with that same calm voice that had once made me doubt my own eyes. But this time he was not speaking to one woman alone in a private room. He was speaking to a room full of people looking at evidence. That was his downfall. The award was withdrawn pending investigation. His company announced an immediate internal review. Several clients left before dessert was served. Colleagues who had admired him watched with a stunned expression of people realizing that a polished surface can hide rot. The senior executive who had praised him minutes earlier could barely look at him. The most poetic part was not that he was exposed. It was where he was exposed. Adrian had spent years building a reputation around integrity. That reputation became the stage where his dishonesty was revealed. He had used careful words to control women. Those same written words became evidence. He had hidden behind privacy. His pattern became visible because the women he separated finally stood together. He had made each of us feel alone. Together, we became undeniable. After the gala, Adrian called me 17 times. I did not answer. He sent long messages. At first, they were sorrowful, then defensive, then wounded, then subtly blaming. The pattern was so familiar that I almost felt detached reading them. He said he had been confused. He said he loved me in his own way. He said Vanessa had misunderstood. He said Elise was bitter. He said he had never meant to hurt anyone. He said I was letting other people poison what we had. For the first time, his words had no power. I saved the messages and sent them to the ethics board. That was all. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected because Adrian had made enemies without realizing it. People who had once stayed quiet began speaking. A junior employee revealed that Adrian had used company events to approach women under the appearance of mentorship. A former client admitted he had seen uncomfortable behavior, but dismissed it because Adrian seemed so respectable. Another woman came forward after recognizing the pattern in the internal report. His public image did not collapse in one loud explosion. It rotted under daylight. Within a month, Adrian resigned before he could be formally dismissed. The company issued a statement about ethical violations. His award disappeared from official records. The professional circles that once admired him became careful about being associated with his name. He was not destroyed by gossip. He was undone by documentation. And I was left with the quieter work of healing. That part is less satisfying to people who only want revenge stories. They imagine that once the liar is exposed, the woman he hurt walks into the sunset whole again. But truth does not instantly repair the places manipulation entered. For weeks, I woke with the impulse to check my phone for his approval. I caught myself wondering whether my dress was too bold, whether my tone was too emotional, whether my boundaries were selfish. His voice had lived in my head long enough that silence felt strange. Healing meant removing him from places he had never deserved to enter. I called Maya and apologized. She came over with takeout and no judgment. That kindness nearly broke me. She did not say she had warned me. She did not ask why I had not listened. She simply sat beside me on the floor while I cried in the ugly, exhausted way people cry when they finally stop defending someone who hurt them. I started wearing my old clothes again. At first, it felt rebellious in a small, almost silly way. A red dress, big earrings, bright lipstick, the bracelet Maya gave me. Then it became something deeper. Every choice was a thread returned to my own hands. I went out with friends without explaining myself to anyone. I stayed late at the studio because I loved my work, not because I was neglecting love. I posted a photograph of myself smiling in sunlight and did not delete it when strangers commented. I learned that freedom often returns through ordinary things. Vanessa and I did not become best friends in the dramatic way some people expected. Our bond was real, but it was born from pain, and we respected that. We checked on each other. We shared updates. Sometimes we met for tea, the same drink we had ordered the day we first compared our heartbreak. Over time, our conversations became less about Adrian and more about ourselves. Her work, my design projects, Elise's new job, Marin's photography exhibit, June's move to another city. That was how I knew we were healing. He was no longer the center of the story. Months later, I walked past the cafe where I had first seen Adrian with Vanessa. For a second, my body remembered before my mind did. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. I saw the ghost of myself standing across the street with pastries in her hands, watching love become evidence. I wanted to go to her, that younger version of me, that trusting girl who thought a gentle voice meant honesty, that girl who ignored small wounds because the relationship looked beautiful from far away. I wanted to tell her she was not stupid. I wanted to tell her that being deceived by someone skilled at deception was not a character flaw. I wanted to tell her that her love had been real, even if his performance was not. Instead, I stood there for a moment, breathed, and kept walking. That was victory, too. Not dramatic, not public, but real. One evening, almost a year after the gala, I received a message from an unknown number. It was brief. The sender said Adrian was not the only man in his old professional circle who used charm, mentorship, and moral language to manipulate women. There were others. They shared tactics, protected each other, and laughed about women being too emotional to organize evidence. Attached was a blurred group photo from a private event. Adrian stood among several men I recognized from the gala. For a long time I stared at the screen. The old fear came first, then anger, then something steadier. I had once thought my story was about one bad man. Now I understood that men like Adrian rarely thrive alone. They are protected by cultures that reward polish over character, confidence over honesty, and male reputation over female instinct. They survive because people prefer comfortable lies to inconvenient patterns. They survive because each woman is told she is the exception, the problem, the unstable one, the jealous one, the one who misunderstood. But I was no longer alone. I forwarded the message to Vanessa Elise Marin and the lawyer who had helped us prepare our statements. Then I sat by my window and looked out at the city lights, feeling not helpless, but awake. Adrian had been the first mask to fall. He would not be the last. My story is not a warning against love. I still believe in love, real love. The kind that does not need to isolate you to feel powerful. The kind that does not ask you to shrink so someone else can feel mature. The kind that can survive questions because it has nothing to hide. But my story is a warning against confusing manners with morality. A man can open doors and still close a cage around you. He can speak softly and still lie with precision. He can praise loyalty while betraying everyone who trusts him. He can look respectable in public and be rotten in private. A clean shirt, a calm voice, and beautiful words do not prove a clean heart. Do not only watch how someone treats you when they are trying to win you. Watch how they treat boundaries. Watch how they respond to doubt. Watch whether their privacy protects peace or hides deception. Watch whether your world becomes larger with them in it or smaller. And never hate the other woman before you know whether she was lied to as well. Sometimes the person you think is your rival is standing in the same burning house, holding the same smoke in her lungs. Sometimes the most powerful thing two women can do is stop fighting over a man who deceived them both and start comparing the truth he worked so hard to keep apart. Adrian lost me the day I saw him with Vanessa, but I found myself slowly afterward. I found myself in the questions I finally dared to ask, in the friends I returned to, in the clothes I wore again, in the evidence I saved, in the women who stood beside me, in the silence after his messages stopped mattering. In the morning I woke up and realized I no longer missed him, only the illusion of safety he had sold me. That is the strange mercy of betrayal. It destroys the lie you were living inside. And if you are brave enough to face the wreckage, it can also show you the truth you abandoned for someone unworthy. In the end, Adrian was not the gentleman I loved. He was the lesson I survived, and I did not lose a future when I lost him. I escaped one. For 17 years, Grace Whitmore believed she had a happy marriage. Not a perfect marriage, because no real marriage is perfect, but the kind people admired from a distance, the kind of marriage relatives praised during family dinners, the kind friends used as an example when they wanted to believe love could survive poverty, struggle, exhaustion, and time. Grace and Daniel Whitmore had started with almost nothing. They had rented a small apartment above a bakery, slept on a second-hand mattress, eaten cheap noodles during their hardest months, and counted coins at the kitchen table while promising each other that one day life would become easier. And it did. Year by year, sacrifice by sacrifice, they climbed. Daniel became the founder and CEO of Whitmore Holdings, a company that began with one risky logistics contract and grew into a powerful business with offices, investors, luxury clients, and a name that appeared in financial magazines. Their home changed from a narrow apartment to a beautiful house with tall windows, a quiet garden, imported furniture, and a garage that held cars Grace once thought only existed in other people's lives. Their children attended good schools. Their parents received medical care. Their social circle expanded. Their family photos looked warm, polished, and complete. To everyone else, Daniel was the dream husband. He spoke gently in public. He thanked Grace during company events. He called her the woman who had stood beside him before the world believed in him. He remembered anniversaries, wore his wedding ring, and carried himself with the steady dignity of a man who had earned both wealth and respect. At charity dinners, people looked at Grace with admiration and said she was lucky. Grace would smile when they said that, because for many years, she believed it too. She believed she was lucky to have a husband who had not forgotten where they came from. She believed all the lonely nights, all the postponed dreams, all the quiet sacrifices had been worth it because they had built something together. She believed hardship had purified their love, turning it into something stronger than romance. She believed that when two people rise from nothing, side by side, the history between them becomes unbreakable. But some histories are not built on love. Some are built on usefulness. Grace did not know that yet. She only knew the life she had lived. She remembered the early years with painful clarity. Daniel had been ambitious then, but ambition alone could not pay rent. His first business failed within 8 months. The second nearly collapsed before it opened. Banks refused him. Investors ignored him. Friends admired his courage, but would not risk their money. In those days, Daniel spoke of dreams with fire in his eyes, but it was Grace who kept the lights on. She worked as an accountant during the day and helped Daniel at night. She reviewed invoices, corrected projections, prepared documents, answered emails, cooked dinner, washed clothes, and smiled through exhaustion because she believed they were building a future. When Daniel needed emergency capital, she sold the gold bracelet her grandmother had left her. When the company could not afford office help, she became the office help. When he needed credibility with suppliers, she used her calm intelligence to reassure them. When he lost his temper after another rejection, she stood beside him and reminded him that failure was not the end. She did not call it sacrifice back then. She called it marriage. When their first child was born, Grace returned to work sooner than her body was ready because the business needed cash flow. When their second child came, she handled midnight feedings and payroll spreadsheets in the same week. When Daniel traveled to meet investors, she stayed home with feverish children, overdue bills, and a laptop full of financial reports. She built systems inside the company long before anyone knew her name. She tracked expenses, negotiated payment schedules, caught mistakes that could have ruined contracts, and created the internal discipline that allowed Daniel's boldness to appear brilliant rather than reckless. In public, Daniel was the visionary. In private, Grace was the structure beneath him. But she never demanded applause. She did not want to compete with her husband. She wanted to build with him. There is a kind of love that takes pride in another person's shine because you believe that shine belongs partly to both of you. Grace lived inside that kind of love for a long time. When Whitmore Holdings finally succeeded, Daniel cried in their old kitchen. Grace still remembered it. The company had secured its first major contract, and Daniel had held the signed papers with trembling hands. He had told her in a voice thick with emotion that he could not have done it without her. Grace believed him. She held him, and thought that every difficult year had finally found its meaning. What she did not know was that even then, another woman was already living quietly inside Daniel's heart. Her name was Sophia Lane. Grace had heard the name once or twice in the early days, always presented as someone from Daniel's past, an old friend, a former love that had ended before Grace came into his life. Daniel never spoke of her with longing, at least not openly. He said their relationship had been immature, that life had taken them in different directions, that he had learned from it and moved forward. Grace did not press him. Everyone had a past. She believed the past was only dangerous when people kept feeding it. Daniel had not merely fed it. He had built another life around it. Sophia had been the woman Daniel loved before poverty stripped romance down to its practical bones. She was beautiful, delicate, and raised with expectations of comfort. When Daniel had nothing but ambition and debt, Sophia had not wanted to suffer beside him. She had loved the idea of him, perhaps, but not the reality of starting at zero. She had wanted stability, softness, and a man who could protect her from hardship. Daniel understood that, and instead of letting her go, he made a cruel calculation. Grace would never forget the moment she finally understood it. Daniel had not chosen her because she was the woman he loved most. He had chosen her because she was strong enough to endure what Sophia would not. Grace was the woman who could survive unpaid bills, cramped rooms, humiliating rejections, and years of uncertainty. Grace was practical, loyal, capable, and patient. Grace could help him build the life he wanted. Sophia was the woman he wanted to place inside that life after it was built. But before Grace discovered that truth, her world still looked peaceful. The day everything shattered was bright and ordinary. It was a Sunday afternoon in late spring. The house was quiet. Their children were both away, one at a school activity and the other at a friend's birthday gathering. Daniel had told Grace he needed to attend a business brunch with potential partners. He had kissed her forehead before leaving, apologized for missing lunch at home, and promised that once the next expansion phase settled, he would take the whole family on a vacation. Grace had watched him adjust his cufflinks by the hallway mirror and felt, as she often did, a soft mixture of pride and tired affection. He still looked like the man she had fought beside, a little older, more polished, more distant perhaps, but still Daniel. Grace spent the morning sorting old family photos for their upcoming anniversary party. 17 years of marriage. Their friends had insisted on celebrating. Daniel's company wanted to turn the event into something elegant, part personal milestone and part brand story. The loyal husband and wife who had risen together, the family behind the empire. The image was useful, and Grace, though uncomfortable with attention, agreed because she believed the story was true. She had just found a photo from their first apartment when her phone lit up. The number was unknown. At first, she ignored it. Unknown messages usually meant spam appointment reminders or delivery notices. But then, another message arrived, followed by a photograph. Grace opened it casually. Then the room stopped moving. The message said her husband was spending the day with the sender and their child. Beneath it was a photo. Daniel stood in the sunlight outside a lakeside cafe, smiling in a way Grace had not seen in years. Beside him was a woman wearing a cream dress, her hand resting comfortably on his arm. Between them stood a little boy, perhaps 6 years old, holding Daniel's hand and looking up at him with the open trust of a child who knew exactly who his father was. It looked like a family photo, not a scandalous picture, not a blurry hotel snapshot, not something that could be dismissed as misunderstanding. A family photo. Grace stared at it so long her vision blurred. There are moments in life when pain arrives faster than thought. The mind tries to protect itself by refusing meaning. Grace told herself the image was fake. She told herself it could be an old photo edited by someone cruel. She told herself perhaps Daniel had helped a friend. Perhaps the child belonged to a relative. Perhaps the woman had exaggerated. Perhaps there was a reasonable explanation hiding somewhere just beyond the first wave of shock. But her body knew before her mind accepted it. Her hands went cold. Her breathing became shallow. The old family photos on the table suddenly looked like artifacts from a life that might never have existed the way she remembered it. She zoomed in on the little boy's face. That was the mistake that broke her. He had Daniel's eyes. Grace put the phone down gently, as if sudden movement might make the truth worse. She walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and forgot to drink it. Through the window, the garden looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes earlier. The roses were blooming. Sunlight moved across the counter. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked. The world had the cruelty to remain beautiful, while hers collapsed. When Daniel came home that evening, Grace said nothing. She had expected herself to scream. She had imagined, before ever living such a moment, that betrayal would turn her into fire. But when he entered the house, loosened his tie, and asked about dinner, with the same calm familiarity as always, Grace felt only a terrible stillness. He lied immediately. Not because she accused him, because lying had become his natural language. He mentioned the business brunch. He described vague conversations with investors. He said the meeting had gone well, but had been draining. He looked tired, but not guilty. That frightened her more than guilt would have. A guilty man might still possess a conscience. Daniel looked like a man returning from one life to another, confident that the walls between them remained intact. Grace watched him wash his hands at the sink. Those hands had held another child that afternoon. Those hands had touched another woman with ease. Those hands had once held Grace's when they had nothing. She almost asked him then. The words rose into her throat, but she swallowed them, because a single confrontation would give him control of the story. Daniel had built a company from negotiation, charm, and timing. He knew how to explain. He knew how to soften facts. He knew how to turn emotion into weakness and questions into accusations. Grace had helped him build that skill. She knew its power better than anyone. So she smiled faintly and said she was tired. That night, Daniel slept beside her. Grace lay awake until dawn. The man breathing next to her felt like a stranger wearing the shape of her husband. She thought of the photograph again and again. The child's hand in his, the woman's smile. Daniel's face relaxed and proud, not ashamed, not cautious. Proud. By morning, Grace had made a decision. She would not ask for truth. She would find it. The first thing she did was save everything. The message, the photo, the number, the timestamp. She sent copies to a private email Daniel did not know about. Then she searched the phone number. It was registered under no public name, but small traces led to a private messaging account. From there, after hours of careful searching, she found Sophia Lane. Sophia's online presence was elegant but controlled, not too public, not hidden either. There were photos of expensive flowers, a child's hand holding ice cream, a balcony view from a luxury apartment, weekend trips, designer bags placed casually beside coffee cups. Daniel's face never appeared fully, but Grace saw pieces of him everywhere. A watch on a table, a shoulder in a reflection, his hand on the edge of a frame. The same brand of cufflinks Grace had bought him for his 42nd birthday. The dates went back years. Grace felt herself becoming colder with every post. The child was not new. The affair was not recent. Sophia had been living comfortably for a long time, not as a passing mistake, not as a temporary weakness. She had been maintained, protected, and hidden. Grace began with financial records. For years, she had stepped back from active company management after the children grew older, and Daniel insisted she deserved rest. He had framed it beautifully. He said she had sacrificed enough that professional teams could handle operations, now that she should enjoy the life they built. At the time, Grace had believed it was love. Now she wondered whether it had been removal. She still knew enough to look. Old habits returned quickly. She reviewed statements, property records, subsidiary accounts, consultant payments, employee reimbursements, and charitable transfers. At first, the hidden movements were hard to see. Daniel had been careful. Money did not flow directly from their joint accounts to Sophia. It moved through layers: consulting fees, project advances, shell vendors, lifestyle expenses disguised as client hospitality. A trust with a name that sounded harmless. But Grace had built the company's original accounting system. She knew its bones. By the third week, she found the apartment, a luxury unit in Sophia's name, purchased through an entity connected to Whitmore Holdings. The down payment had been funded during a period Grace remembered vividly. It was the same year the company nearly failed after a major client delayed payment. Grace had mortgaged personal assets then. She had used inherited funds from her grandmother. She had cut household expenses, delayed medical treatment, and told the children that vacations could wait because their father's company needed support. She had believed she was saving their family. Daniel had used that survival period to buy Sophia a home. Grace stared at the property file until the numbers became meaningless shapes. That was when heartbreak transformed into something sharper. Not rage yet. Rage is hot and scattered. What Grace felt was colder. A clean, precise understanding that the man she loved had not merely betrayed her body or her trust. He had rewritten the meaning of her suffering. The nights she spent awake over payroll had helped finance another woman's comfort. The jewelry she sold, the savings she sacrificed, the years she spent holding him up, had protected Sophia from the hardship Daniel never wanted his true beloved to endure. Grace had been the bridge. Sophia had been the destination. As the investigation deepened, the truth became uglier. Daniel had paid for Sophia's living expenses for years. The boys' school fees came from a private account connected to a Whitmore consultant. A medical insurance policy listed Daniel under a hidden guardian arrangement. Travel bookings showed family trips taken while Daniel had supposedly been away on business. There were hotel stays, jewelry purchases, tuition deposits, and a long chain of payments designed to appear unrelated until viewed together. Grace also found messages, not at first. Daniel guarded his devices carefully, but he had made one mistake. Years earlier, during an office migration, old emails had been archived to a company server Grace still had authorized access to as a founding shareholder. Most were business-related. Some were personal enough to destroy whatever denial remained. She did not need explicit details. The emotional truth was worse. Daniel had written to Sophia during the early years of his marriage. He had described Grace as reliable, strong, practical, and capable of enduring difficult times. He had written that Sophia deserved a softer life than the one he could offer then. He had promised that once he succeeded, things would be different. He had referred to his marriage not as a love story, but as a necessary foundation. Necessary foundation. Grace repeated those words in her mind until they lost shape. She had been a wife. He had seen a foundation. Every memory began to rearrange itself. The proposal that once seemed humble and sincere, the gratitude during hard years, the way he praised her strength whenever asking for more sacrifice, the way he discouraged her from returning to her own career after the company grew, the way he brought her to events as proof of loyalty while keeping Sophia hidden in comfort, the way he thanked Grace publicly because a grateful husband was good for his image. It had all been useful. Even their anniversary party was useful. Whitmore Holdings was preparing to celebrate its 17th year with a grand banquet. Investors, partners, family members, media contacts, and employees would attend. Daniel would be honored as a visionary founder, devoted husband, and inspiring father. Grace was expected to stand beside him, elegant and smiling, the woman who represented his humble beginnings and moral credibility. Daniel did not know that by then Grace had already hired a lawyer, not just a divorce attorney, a forensic accountant, a corporate litigator, a private investigator. Grace moved carefully because everything Daniel had done depended on her remaining emotional, embarrassed, and slow. She refused to give him that advantage. She gathered documents. She confirmed asset trails. She verified the child's birth record. She obtained proof of hidden transfers. She secured copies of messages. She documented her own contributions to the company from its earliest days. She also met Sophia, not in anger. Grace arranged it through the same number that had sent the first message. Sophia agreed, perhaps expecting confrontation, perhaps hoping to wound Grace further, perhaps believing she had already won. They met in a quiet hotel lounge on a rainy afternoon. Sophia was beautiful in a soft, expensive way. She looked like a woman who had never carried boxes during an office move, never negotiated overdue rent, never stayed up all night fixing invoices while a baby cried in the next room. Grace hated herself for thinking that at first. It was not Sophia's beauty that hurt. It was the comfort around her, the evidence of a life protected by someone else's labor. Sophia spoke with confidence at the beginning. She believed Grace already knew enough to be broken, but not enough to fight. She suggested indirectly and without shame that Daniel had always loved her, but had obligations he did not know how to escape. She described their child as Daniel's true emotional anchor. She framed Grace as a good woman, even a respectable wife, but not the woman of Daniel's heart. Grace listened. Then she asked one question. She asked whether Sophia had known Daniel was using marital assets and company resources to support her. Sophia's expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. That was the moment Grace understood Sophia was not merely an innocent woman waiting in the shadows. She may not have known every accounting detail, but she knew enough. She knew Daniel had a wife. She knew there were children in the official family. She knew the life she enjoyed did not come from clean separation. She had accepted the arrangement because it benefited her. Perhaps she had once loved Daniel. Perhaps she still did. But love does not make another woman's suffering invisible, unless selfishness helps it. Grace left the meeting with no more doubts. The anniversary banquet arrived on a warm evening held in the grand ballroom of a hotel Daniel had once been too poor to enter. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, white flowers lined the stage. A large screen displayed photographs of Daniel's career, the first office, the first contract, the first warehouse, the company headquarters, charity events, family portraits, magazine covers. In several of those photos, Grace stood beside him, smiling, with the tired grace of a woman who had no idea she was being used as part of a brand. Guests praised the marriage before the program began. They told Grace how inspiring it was to see a couple remain united through success. They said Daniel was rare a man who had not abandoned his family after becoming powerful. They said she must be proud. Grace smiled politely. Pride was no longer the word. Daniel arrived looking immaculate. He kissed her cheek in front of guests. His hand rested at her waist with practiced warmth. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple. He asked softly whether she was feeling all right because she seemed quiet. Grace said she was simply taking everything in. That was true. She was taking in the final minutes of the lie. The speeches began. Partners praised Daniel's vision. Employees praised his leadership. A charity director praised his compassion. Then the host invited Daniel to the stage to accept a commemorative award, honoring not only his business success, but his devotion to family values and loyal partnership. Grace watched him walk up. He stood under golden light, handsome, confident, deeply comfortable inside the admiration of others. He spoke about beginnings. He spoke about struggle. He spoke about how every empire needed love at its foundation. He turned toward Grace and thanked her for standing by him from nothing to everything. People applauded. Grace rose. The applause softened into surprise. She did not rush the stage. She did not cry. She did not throw accusations into the room like a wounded woman begging to be believed. She walked calmly to the front, holding a small remote connected to the presentation system her legal team had already secured through event staff cooperation. Daniel's smile faltered when he saw her expression. For the first time, he looked afraid. Grace did not need to say much. The screen behind him changed. The first image was the photograph Sophia had sent. Daniel, Sophia, and the little boy standing like a family in the sun. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Daniel turned toward the screen and went pale. Then came the timeline. Dates, payments, property records, school fees, travel bookings, hidden accounts, corporate transfers, birth documentation, messages. Every piece presented with legal precision, not emotional chaos. The room watched Daniel's second life unfold in front of them. Not as rumor, not as gossip, as evidence. Grace did not expose the child cruelly. She protected his identity as much as possible because the boy was innocent. The adults had made the choices. The child had only existed inside the consequences. But Daniel's choices were undeniable. The most devastating slide showed the property purchase, the apartment Sophia lived in, the funds used, the date, the connection to the same period when Grace had mortgaged personal assets to save Whitmore Holdings. People in the room understood slowly, then all at once. Grace had sacrificed to rescue the company. Daniel had used that survival to secure comfort for his mistress. Then came the message that ended his image forever. Not a private, intimate confession, but a written statement Daniel had made years earlier, describing Grace as strong enough to endure the difficult years, while Sophia deserved to be spared that hardship. The words appeared on the screen without embellishment. Grace had wondered before that night whether displaying them would break her again. It did not. It broke him. Daniel tried to speak. Of course he did. Men like Daniel always believe explanation can rearrange reality if given enough time. He reached for the microphone and began framing the matter as private, complicated, painful, and misunderstood. He spoke of mistakes, emotional confusion, responsibility, and not wanting to hurt anyone. But the room had already seen the structure of the lie. A mistake does not last for years. Confusion does not buy apartments, pay tuition, hide accounts, and rehearse family speeches under chandeliers. Grace finally spoke. Her voice was steady. She explained that she had not come to destroy a family, but to reveal the truth about the family Daniel had already destroyed. She reminded everyone that she had stood beside him when there was no money, no office, no reputation, and no guarantee. She had not been a decoration in his success story. She had been one of its builders. And because he had used marital assets, company resources, and public deception to maintain a hidden life, the matter was no longer merely personal. It was legal. It was financial. It was moral. Daniel's board members looked at one another with horror. Investors checked their phones. Family members sat frozen. His parents lowered their heads. Grace's relatives wept quietly, not because they understood everything, but because betrayal looks different when evidence leaves no room for denial. Then Sophia appeared at the back of the ballroom. Grace had not expected her to come, though perhaps she should have. Sophia arrived dressed elegantly, face pale, eyes fixed on Daniel. Whether she had come to support him, confront him, or save herself, no one would ever know. But the moment guests recognized her from the evidence, the room shifted. She was no longer the hidden beloved in a protected apartment. She was part of the truth, standing under public light. Daniel looked between his wife and the woman he had hidden for years. For once, neither could protect his image. That was his poetic justice. He had used Grace as the public symbol of loyalty, and Sophia as the private reward of success. In the end, both women stood in the same room while the world saw him clearly. He had built his reputation on being a devoted husband, and that very reputation became the stage where his betrayal was exposed. He had hidden assets through the company Grace helped build, and those records became the weapon that dismantled his control. He had counted on Grace's love to keep her silent, but he had forgotten that the woman who helped build an empire understood how foundations worked, and she knew exactly where to strike. The aftermath was brutal. Daniel stepped down temporarily from Whitmore Holdings within 48 hours. The board opened an internal review. Investors demanded transparency. The company's public relations team tried to contain the damage, but the story had already spread beyond control. A founder praised for family values had been exposed using hidden structures to support a secret family. The hypocrisy was too perfect for the media to ignore. Grace filed for divorce. She also filed claims regarding marital assets, misappropriated funds, shareholder rights, and financial concealment. Her legal team moved quickly, freezing certain accounts before Daniel could shift money. Sophia's apartment became part of the dispute because the funds used to purchase it were tied to marital and corporate resources. The luxurious life Daniel had built for her began to crack under legal scrutiny. Daniel begged for a private conversation. Grace allowed one, but only with attorneys present. He looked different then. Without the stage, the suit, the applause, and the illusion of control, he seemed smaller. He apologized, but the apology arrived carrying too many motives. He said he had loved Grace in his own way. He said things had become complicated. He said he had never meant to hurt the children. He said Sophia had been part of his past that he could not fully abandon. He said Grace was stronger than anyone he knew. That last sentence almost made her laugh. Strength had been the word he used to justify everything. Grace told him calmly that he had never admired her strength. He had exploited it. He had chosen her because she could survive hardship, and chosen Sophia because he did not want Sophia to experience it. He had mistaken Grace's loyalty for something endlessly renewable, as if love were a resource he could drain without consequence. Daniel cried then. Grace had once believed his tears were rare and meaningful. Now they were only late. The children suffered most quietly. They were old enough to understand betrayal, but young enough to feel it as a collapse of safety. Grace did not poison them against their father. She told them the truth in careful, age-appropriate ways. She made it clear that Daniel's failures as a husband did not erase their right to love him as a father, but she also refused to protect his image at the cost of their understanding. Children do not heal from lies by being given softer lies. That was one of the hardest parts. Grace could fight lawyers, boards, and public humiliation, but watching her children process their father's choices nearly broke her. Her oldest child asked whether their entire family had been fake. Grace held that question with both hands like something fragile and burning. She explained that her love had been real. Their childhood had been real. The meals, the birthdays, the bedtime stories, the school mornings, the laughter in the kitchen. Those things were real because she had lived them honestly. Daniel's deception contaminated the marriage, but it did not erase every moment of love she had given. That answer saved her, too. For weeks, Grace had wondered whether her life had been a lie. Then she realized something important. Daniel had lied. She had not. Her devotion had been real. Her sacrifices had been real. Her loyalty had been real. Her labor had been real. His betrayal changed what he was not, what she had been. The divorce proceedings revealed even more than Grace expected. Daniel had hidden not only money for Sophia, but investment positions, trusts, and side agreements that excluded Grace despite her founding contributions. He had slowly structured the company to reduce her visible influence, trusting that she would never look closely because she believed in him. That was his greatest financial mistake. He had forgotten that Grace had once known every account, every debt, every fragile mechanism keeping the early business alive. She did not just take back wealth. She took back authorship. During negotiations, Daniel's team tried to frame her as an emotional spouse seeking punishment. Grace's attorneys responded with documents showing her operational contributions from the company's earliest years. Emails, accounting records, contract drafts, handwritten notes, early investor presentations, payroll systems, tax filings, and crisis funding trails all proved what Daniel's public speeches had only vaguely acknowledged. Grace had not merely stood beside him, she had built with him. The settlement was not gentle. Grace received controlling influence over a major portion of the company's family trust holdings, substantial assets, and legal recognition of funds misused during the marriage. Daniel retained a role only after severe restrictions, and eventually even that became impossible under shareholder pressure. He had risen by using Grace's competence, but once she withdrew her protection, the man behind the image could not carry the same weight. Sophia left the apartment before the legal process concluded. Her life of quiet luxury ended almost as suddenly as Grace's illusion had. Some people pitied her. Grace did not. She pitied the child who had never asked to be born into secrecy. But Sophia had known enough to enjoy what another woman had paid for in years of invisible labor. Losing comfort gained through betrayal was not tragedy. It was consequence. 6 months after the anniversary banquet, Grace returned to the old apartment above the bakery. It had been renovated, but the staircase still creaked in the same place. The bakery below still filled the hall with the smell of bread in the early morning. Grace had not been there in years. Daniel had once said they should never look back too often because success required forward motion. Now she understood he had not wanted to look back because the past contained too much evidence of what she had done for him. She stood in the small room where they had once slept on a second-hand mattress. At first, she expected to feel foolish. Instead, she felt grief and tenderness for the woman she had been. That young Grace had not been stupid. She had been brave. She had loved with both hands. She had worked beyond exhaustion. She had believed in partnership not because she was weak, but because she was capable of devotion. The tragedy was not that she had given too much. The tragedy was that she had given it to someone who saw devotion as a tool. A year later, Grace attended a company event alone, not as Daniel's wife, not as the loyal woman standing behind a man's success. She attended as Grace Whitmore, co-founder, major shareholder, strategist, mother, and survivor. The room treated her differently now, some with respect, some with guilt, some with calculation. She understood all of it. Public opinion had turned in her favor, but she no longer trusted applause simply because it sounded kind. She spoke that night about rebuilding trust after institutional betrayal. Not personal betrayal, though. Everyone knew the shadow behind her words. She spoke about transparency, accountability, and the danger of building companies around charismatic men whose private ethics go unquestioned because their public image is profitable. She spoke about invisible labor, not only in business, but in families. She spoke about the wives, partners, assistants, and quiet builders whose names rarely appear on plaques, though their work holds entire structures together. When she finished, the applause was long. This time she did not look for Daniel in the room. He was not there. And even if he had been, it would not have mattered. Grace's life did not become painless after justice. That is not how healing works. Some mornings she still woke with memories that cut unexpectedly. A certain song, a business phrase, the smell of Daniel's old cologne on a stranger passing by. Betrayal leaves echoes, but echoes are not chains. Over time, they grew softer. She learned to sleep in the middle of the bed. She learned to drink coffee without checking Daniel's schedule. She learned to make decisions without wondering whether they would protect his reputation. She took her children on the vacation he had promised for years and never made time for. They went to the sea. One evening, while her children ran along the shore, Grace stood barefoot in the sand and felt the wind move through her hair. For the first time in a long time, she was not someone's foundation. She was not someone's proof of loyalty. She was not the woman who endured, so another woman could be spared. She was simply alive, and that was enough. But the past was not finished with her. Late one evening, while reviewing archived financial files connected to the old company structure, Grace found a set of documents that did not fit. They were not Daniel's usual pattern. The signatures, authorizations, and timing suggested someone else had helped move certain assets years earlier. Someone with access to family records and enough trust to avoid suspicion. At first, Grace assumed it was one of Daniel's executives. Then she saw the name attached to an old authorization note. Her hand froze over the file. The person who had helped Daniel hide part of the financial trail was not a stranger, not a corporate officer, not even Sophia. It was someone from Grace's own family. For a long moment she sat in silence, staring at the evidence as the city lights glowed beyond her office window. The betrayal she had survived had already remade her life. Now another truth waited beneath it, older and closer than she had imagined. Grace closed the file carefully. She did not cry. The woman who once collapsed inside a lie was gone. In her place was someone quieter, sharper, and far less willing to mistake closeness for loyalty. Daniel had taught her that love without truth could become a prison. Now she would learn how deep the prison had really been. Her story reminds us that a marriage can look perfect from the outside and still be hiding a wound no one sees. A man can praise his wife in public while betraying her in private. A family can smile in photographs while one person is quietly carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort. Never take for granted the person who suffers beside you when you have nothing. The one who stays during poverty, failure, humiliation, and uncertainty is not a tool to be used until success arrives. Their loyalty is not a ladder. Their strength is not permission to wound them. Their sacrifice is not something you spend on another person. And if you are the one who gave too much, loved too deeply, and woke up one day to discover that your devotion was used against you, remember this: the betrayal does not make your love foolish. It proves the betrayer was unworthy of it. Grace did not lose everything when she lost Daniel. She lost the illusion that had been stealing her life. She lost the man who had mistaken her strength for something he could exploit forever. She lost the marriage that had asked her to be a foundation while someone else enjoyed the house. And in losing that lie, she found the truth. She was never just the wife behind his empire. She was one of the reasons the empire existed. And once she finally stood up, the man who thought he had built everything discovered that without her, even his throne had been standing on borrowed ground.